When the spinning stops, chaos and confusion. How many of you remember the first time you saw The Wizard of Oz? I was 6 years old. It was December 10th in 1961. Now, the reason I know that is CBS broadcast The Wizard of Oz every year from 1956, once a year, to 1998. And so that was the date they did it in 1961, and I knew how old I was. I was sitting in front of a TV tray with a grilled cheese sandwich, and that kind of became the yearly tradition with me. It certainly scared me at times, but it's still such a memorable thing. But I see that we played that tape this morning because that's the world we're in right now, with COVID and other things going on. But it's not just the world we're in because of COVID. It's that world that sometimes impacts us day to day. Relationships and finances and different things that can happen, a bad diagnosis, all kinds of things happen that throw our world into chaos and confusion. But we all remember that phrase, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. Well, Dorothy uttered it to try to get back there. We utter it on occasions about our own homes. I was thinking back about my childhood home when I was between the ages of 3 and 8 or 9. And I remember getting up in the wintertime and laying in front of the fireplace in my pajamas, trying to stay warm and just hoping that my mother didn't force me to get to school as early as sometimes she did. I would enjoy that moment. Or it was a grandparents' home where I spent weeks every year enjoying that time. And I can remember, right now, I can remember the smells, the sounds of my grandmother in the kitchen. I remember there also a floor furnace where all the cousins, we would stand over it in our pajamas as long as we could, and then we'd step off for a minute. We'd go back and forth. Fun times. The kinds of times that you say there's no place like that home. Back in 2018, Lainey and I renovated the house we're living in now, and trust me, it was chaos and confusion for several months. But once it was all completed, it still didn't feel like home. And I can't remember exactly the moment, but at some point, we looked at each other and you said, you know, this is starting to feel like home. There's no place like home. Well, how does home feel? What's it feel like? Well, it feels like those homes that we grew up in. Maybe it's our grandparents' home. But does it always feel safe or not? Now, in the physical world, we do things to have safety in our homes. Perhaps it's an alarm system. We have one, and there's sometimes it goes off, and we have to chase it to the pad to turn it off. A couple of weeks ago, sometimes I'll leave early, and Lainey's still asleep, and I'll turn it back on when I leave. And I was at my office the other day, and I get an alert that somebody's triggered the alarm. Well, I knew I could close my eyes and knew exactly what happened. She opened the front door, which she does in the morning, to water some plants, forgetting that the alarm might be on. And I also could picture her running as fast as she could around to the pad to turn it off. So even though those things happen like that on occasion, still at night we sleep a little more securely because of those kinds of physical things. Maybe it's the neighborhood that you live in that makes you feel safe or not. We certainly know there are neighborhoods that that's not the case. Maybe it's the floor plan. Sometimes it's nice to have a second floor and our bedroom is up there, and we know if nobody can crawl in our window on the second floor. But we also know we're on the second floor and somebody might come in on the first and we wouldn't know it. So it's kind of a toss-up. Maybe there's a pet that makes you feel safe because they're going to go ballistic whenever they hear or smell something that's not normal. Or maybe you grew up in a home with lots of siblings and people and there was a sense of safety there. So there's that physical safety, but that's not the only kind of safe or not at home. Maybe your home was a place of safety, emotional and relational safety. You felt at home. You felt like you were in a safe spot or not. Maybe you grew up in a home where there was lots of conflict, sometimes lots of yelling and screaming and frustrations. Maybe you've experienced that kind of home even more lately with things in turmoil and chaos and confusion, perhaps in your own relationships. Well, sometimes home may be safe, sometimes not. Is it happy or not? That's sort of going to that emotional security kind of thing in relationships, but also goes to financial security. And you don't feel at risk there, both relationally and or financially. We know that so many people in COVID and not being able to pay rent and things, there's so much lack of insecurity and unhappiness now going around because just of the financial circumstances. But it's happy or not maybe sometimes because there are things that we enjoy doing. We enjoy hobbies and different things that we can spend our time with. Is it comfortable or not? Back in 1973, the average square foot per person in a home was 507 square feet. In 2013, that had risen to 907 square feet per person. So maybe it's physical space that makes you feel more comfortable than a different physical space. Maybe it's activities around the house, the hobbies and the home improvements and gardening that makes you have a sense of comfort there. I started to say back in the pandemic, we're in the pandemic, but back during the lockdown in particular, here are the 15 most popular hobbies that people engaged in. Watching TV shows. Now, we mastered that one. Reading. I'm going to brag a little bit. I've actually read 53 books since March of 20. Now, they're not War and Peace, I'm telling you that. Working out. Well, some of us use the time to work out, some not. Arts and crafts. I know that Lainey enjoys doing that with our grandkids and doing different things like that. So some of those got picked up more during the pandemic. Board games, DIY project. Some of you may have even gotten into yoga, baking, gardening, video games, meditation, audio books and podcasts, writing. Number 14, learning a language. And number 15, learning an instrument. Those are those activities that somehow create a little more comfort during that lockdown. So home doesn't always feel safe. It may. It's happy or not, comfortable or not. Also, home isn't always an easy place to be. Maybe it is spinning around like Dorothy's house. Maybe there are things that are happening in your life that make it very, very difficult. Because there are times when chaos dominates. Something happens, it triggers it, and your world is spinning, and the dictionary defines chaos as a state of total disorder. Now, we've been there in physical circumstances. A number of years before Lainey and I got married, I was living in Lake Forest with my first wife and my kids, and on a late afternoon, I came home from work, and I wanted to relax in the jacuzzi tub in the master bedroom. So I went upstairs, and I started the water, came back down to help with dinner, and the kids were there, and we had WHAS on at the time because there were some storms, and the weather person said, there's a tornado heading right toward Lake Forest. So we grabbed the kids and went down in the safety spot in the basement with a radio and eventually heard the all clear sign. And so we started walking up the stairs from the basement. As we got closer to the top, I could see a little bit of water. And I turned around, and sure enough, water was flowing down the wooden staircase from the upstairs. Total chaos. Maybe you've experienced that kind of chaos in a group setting. Maybe a concert or things get crazy. Maybe you tried to chase a Cabbage Patch doll on a Black Friday. So you know outwardly what chaos can be in a physical sense, but in an emotional and a relational sense, that chaos that ensues, that chaos that I described a little bit earlier, it happens and is triggered by a number of things, and the world's just spinning, and we can't quite get our bearings. There are also times when confusion prevails. The dictionary defines confusion as the state of being bewildered or unclear. Well, one of the most bewildering times physically for me was when Lainey and I tried to put a crib together for our first grandchild a little over 12 and a half years ago. We got the box and opened it, and there was a sheet of instructions that had a little bit more than what you see here. Just a couple of diagrams, and we struggled and fought and struggled. This is the front, no, this is the front. This is the back, this is the back. Eventually we got it down, but that was one of those things we said we will never do again. In fact, when the crib gets moved or anything like that, we're going to get one of the children to do it, one of the more technically capable people, hopefully. But those kinds of experiences are bewildering, and you're unclear about what to do. In group settings, we find bewildering moments when somebody says something to us that's just is way out of sync with the relationship. Maybe it's a conversation we were in, and we hear it being relayed to someone else, and we think, that's not what happened at all. I'm really confused. So confusion happens in relationships. It happens with just life circumstances inundating us. So we have chaos and confusion, and when chaos dominates, we lose sight of the stable forces in our lives. It's like Dorothy looking out the window. Even she saw familiar faces, but you kind of lose sight of where to grab on for stability. We lose sight of that. And when that happens, go to the most stable person you know. Now, there may not be many in your immediate circle because that may be where the chaos and confusion are happening. But if chaos is going on and dominating, then find someone. You may find a counselor who's totally unconnected, but there's always somebody you can find that is stable when you're in the midst of that chaos that's dominating. And you come out of it, you walk out the front door and you look around, and you've got to find somebody. You've got to find somebody. When chaos dominates, go to the most stable person you know. And when confusion prevails, we become paralyzed or destructive. We just stop and freeze because we just don't know what to do next. We don't know how to address what's just happened. So when confusion prevails, get guidance and slow down. Find someone to give you some input and guidance, to bring clarity to what you're dealing with, and slow down. You know, there's a saying that life is short. That's true. But there are times when we need to slow down and walk through things more carefully out of that confusion to a position of clarity. Now, when the spinning stops, it's time to reassess. You walk out that door when the house has landed and you look around and you need to get a lay of the land. I need to reassess relationships. Maybe I need to reassess finances. Maybe I need to reassess just the physical world I'm in and try to understand more what's going on. We need to reassess what's changed. Seldom do you go through a tornado like chaos and confusion and come out of it and things have not changed. What has changed in my world? Is it my physical circumstances, my financial circumstances, my relational circumstances? What's changed? And beyond that, who has changed? You know, families go through things together, but everyone doesn't come out of it the same. We come out of it differently. In friendships and relationships and in corporate groups. When we come out of those points and reassess, what's changed and who has changed. And when the spinning stops, it's time to reset. You've reassessed, you kind of know what and who's changed, and now you kind of reset. How do I move forward? We need to reset our hopes and dreams. The truth is that we don't like to admit, but when the chaos and confusion and the spinning stops, seldom are our hopes and dreams in the same spot they were before that happened. Maybe what I'd hoped for is no longer possible because of that diagnosis. Maybe what I dreamed about is no longer possible because that child relationship and parent relationship is not what I want it to be and what I dreamed for. But I need to reset based on those hopes and dreams and how I can move forward. I need to reset my priorities based on that. Who and what has changed and my circumstances and my dreams and hopes, then reprioritize, change those priorities based on what's going on. How do we do this? How in the world do we find the insight and the understanding and the power and the strength to do these things? We find a little bit of clue in Ephesians chapter 1 where Paul is writing to the church at Ephesus, and he says this, "In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sin in accordance with the riches of his grace which he lavished upon us." We come out of this and we need to walk in that grace of Christ that God has lavished upon us. It gives us a sense of peace, a sense of comfort, and a sense of assurance, knowing that we can walk forward with that confidence. Everything else may be in a shambles, but we have confidence in God's forgiveness. We have confidence in God's grace that he has lavished upon us. And then a few verses later, he says this, "The power is the same as the mighty strength he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead." Think about that. The power is the same. We marvel at the power of the resurrection, the most miraculous thing that's ever happened in the universe. And we look at that power that has raised Jesus from the dead, and Paul says that it's the same strength God uses to give you that grace and that forgiveness and everything else. That's in our hands. That same strength that God provided is the same strength with which God raised Christ from the dead. And then a little bit further, "But now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far away have been brought near by the blood of Christ." Do you know what it feels like to be a stranger in a group, in a city, in the world? Do you know what it's like to look at people you're supposed to be close to and feel so far away? Maybe you're sitting next to that person, but you're so far away. Well, that's how it is with us and God at times. And Paul says, God has brought us near by the blood of Christ. We were far away in that kingdom of darkness, and we've been brought into that kingdom of light. We've been brought near by the blood of Christ. So we reassess, we reset, and ultimately when the spinning stops, we need to reconnect. We've looked at our dreams and hopes, we've recalibrated. We understand the power that God gives us in Jesus Christ, the grace that is there for us to kind of move forward carefully and deliberately. And we need to reconnect with others. Now, sometimes the chaos and confusion leaves relationships different. And some of the reconnections may not be easy and may not even be possible depending on the other party. But we typically come out of those, and some of our relationships we haven't been able to spend time in them like we used to. We've just been prevented by life from being as connected as we'd like. So we come out of that. When the spinning has stopped, take time to reconnect with others. Take time to reconnect with yourself. You know, the lockdown forced a lot of us to kind of pay more attention to ourselves and our own needs. But when the world starts spinning again, we start moving in it, we come out of it, we need to reconnect with ourselves. Find those things that enrich us. Find those things that give us a home feel to life. And, of course, reconnect with God. That's perhaps the most important. You know, while the house is spinning, I can't think about God. I can only think about survival and holding on. And I can't really pay a lot of attention. I'm crying out to God perhaps, but I just can't quite get a handle on things. You know, Paul wrote to the Christians at Ephesus, but it's not the only letter in the Bible to the Ephesians. In Revelation, there are 7 letters from Jesus Christ to 7 different churches. And in Revelation chapter 2, there is a letter from Christ to the church at Ephesus. This is what it says. I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate the wicked people, and that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and have endured hardships for my name, and have not grown weary. What an astounding, complimentary affirmation from Christ to the Christians at Ephesus. He knows their deeds. They've been forbearing. They have tested out and determined the apostles that are not really apostles and some of the wild claims that were going on. They've endured hardship for Christ's name's sake. Huge affirmation. But Jesus didn't stop there. Yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. Consider how far you have fallen. Repent and do the things you did at first. In other words, Jesus is saying you got really good at church. You got really good at the doing of things and persevering and testing things. You got really good at that. But at the end of the day, over time, you've forgotten it was about you and me. The love affair you have with me, the butterflies in the stomach, the flutter of the heartbeat when you knew that Christ loved you deeply and what God has done for us in Jesus Christ. That moment when it really came clear to you about the spiritual and physical world that God had blessed you with. And Jesus says to you in Ephesus, this is what's happened. You have forgotten me, your first love. So what does he say? Go back and do the things you did at first. Do those things that you did early on when we were just learning to love each other. That happens in real life too. A relationship with a partner over the years, and finally you're doing life well. You're doing marriage or partnership or friendship well. You're working with each other. You endure some things. You persevere through some things. But somewhere along the way, you've lost the first love. It no longer feels like the flutters in your heart or the butterflies in your stomach any longer when you spend time with that person. Do the things you did at first. When you're in that spot, go back and find the love letters. Go back and find the poem you wrote for her, she did for you. Go back and find that book that you read together, you read and shared about and talked about. Go back and find those things that just made your heart flutter early on. Do the things you did at first. Go back and listen to those songs that were your favorite. Couples tend to say, well, we have a favorite song. What's your song? What's that song? Sometimes we have those. Go back and listen to that song that you've always said was the one you shared together. When you've lost your first love, it's not the time to walk away. It's the time to go back and do the things you did at first. And the same is true for our relationship with God. Go back and read the love letters from God to you. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. I just got chill bumps saying that because that's who God is with us. That love letter about what God provides us. Go back and read the 23rd Psalm, John chapter 3, whatever the love letter is that you hold to. Go back and listen and sing the favorite songs. One of mine and Laney's favorite song is How Great Is Our God. Join me and sing this. The splendor of a king, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. The Godhead three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, Lion and the Lamb. Here we go. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. And then there's the old hymn that means so much to all of us. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. When the spinning stops, listen and you will hear God saying, I have lavished grace upon you. I have taken the same power that I raised Jesus to make you a part of my family. You were so far away. You were spinning so far away. And I have brought you close into my family. Because there's no place like home.